on 1, Helen Dillon explains the difference between silver plate and old Sheffield, and we see the skillful craft of gilding in Antiques Watch.
Welcome to Antiques Watch. This week Helen will be telling us the difference between electroplate and old Sheffield, and we'll also be learning about the ancient art of gilding. We're going back into the studio where Fancy Mealy is examining what could be a first edition of the Water Babies. But first, things are going very well down at the Restoration Challenge.
I have to say, Chris's music stand's become a bit of a challenge.
No problem.
2 weeks ago he had to get a new leg turned, and now he's about to take on the fretwork. But first, I was quite impressed by the transformation in Anne's £250 chair.
Hello Jim, how are you?
How are you, Anne? Good to see you.
Go straight through there.
Thanks very much. I'm just back to see how Anne's been getting on with this very old, decrepit Regency chair. And you seem to have been getting on pretty well.
Oh, it's been very busy, I'll tell you. There's an awful lot more to it than you think.
What have you been up to then?
Well, I have repaired and rebuilt this ring here, this turning.
Yeah.
I have reproduced these timber braces, as I said, and I have saturated them in preservative, which is a good idea to protect it in the future. And I've just left my phone number on it there. For the next, say, in 70 years' time, somebody wants to call me when they're doing it again. And I've polished it. I have cleaned it down with steel wool, as I said. No harsh chemicals or anything like that. So it's all ready now to be webbed and proceed from here to the upholstery.
Next stage. Perfect. God, you need to watch your fingers there, Anne.
I do indeed. You have to be very careful.
And that's the magnetic hammer you have as well.
These are 16mm tacks because they'll have to stay in for a long time. Now this is a stretcher, a homemade one. You don't have to go out and pay a fortune on them, so you just wrap the thing around like that. Now you have to pull it.
Ooh. It's a great sound, isn't it?
Good and solid like that.
Yeah. So tight as well, isn't it?
Okay, now we're going to turn the chair around to do the cross webbing.
Okay. Because you're very strong with this chair lifting and hammering, aren't you?
Yeah, so now we have to just weave it in around across like this. And just bring it up like that.
So you go through the same process again?
Yeah, this now really strengthens it up. Feel that, bounce on that.
Brilliant.
Okay.
Like a drum.
Like a drum, yeah. So now the next procedure, this is the tight weave hessian.
Okay.
Now we just make sure the weave is straight, so you just anchor it down there. I don't have to fold that because I have my finished edge there. Okay, so we're going to... I'm going to fold it in down here. There we are now, that's finished, nice and tight.
Solid, isn't it? So what's next then?
Now we have to put in the horse there, so we have to loop that in the form of this bridle stitch. So it sort of goes something like this. So you bring it right out to the edge. Now it's very hard to find a horsehair these days, so the only source would be, say, an old mattress, but it's a filthy job cleaning.
Or an old horse. You wouldn't want that, would you? Okay,
so eventually I'll loop this all across like this. So now we put in the horsehair here. So we have to tease it out to not to have any lumps in it. So we just loop it in like this and tighten it up, push it out there, right out to the edge. But basically when this is finished and it's all tight and there are no holes in it and it's nice and secure and feels good, the next procedure is the stitching, and then look for the final cover, you know, which I haven't found yet, but hopefully I get in the next few weeks. The whole idea, as far as I'm concerned, is to do something authentic and to do it the way it used to be in the old days.
So there's a fair bit of work ahead of you, yeah?
There is, yeah, but I'm happy to do it the right way, you know.
Well, as we leave Anne to her hard work, let's go and have a look at Chris and see how he's getting on with that Victorian music stand. Hey, Chris.
Oh, hi, Jim.
This is looking great, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, Willie's pieces make a big difference.
But there's a colour difference, obviously. You're going to have to do something there, aren't you?
Oh, I don't want to assemble it until I get the colour right, and that's going to be a bit of a challenge. Going to use some dyes, and then you really have to use oil paints and really try to replicate the age. And
so you start off keeping it lighter and then just increasing the darkness.
Now I have, I've got a couple of spare pieces, spare leg, and the same wood that I can experiment with. That'll make a huge difference.
And then what's after that?
Well, after that, I've, the top, and the top is, we have the situation with the veneer, a lot of water damage here.
Oh yeah.
So, it's a mirrored effect veneer. That's what I'm calling it. Basically, you can see it down here actually.
Oh yeah, both sides here.
And they've copied it throughout. So I've got it actually cut right through, and as you can see there, I've gotten quite a few extra pieces. It's only about £3 for that.
And you need two anyway, won't you, for the...
Yeah, exactly. So I got a bit extra because it's going to take some practice.
To cover yourself?
Yeah. So, on the top, the rest of the top is really, it came down to the fretwork here, as you can see in the centre. It's very detailed.
This is the one you did the last time for the other side here.
And I suppose, being frank about it, it'll be difficult, and I could be there for a month. So I'm going to actually borrow an electric fret saw. And
you wouldn't have been much use in the 18th century, would you?
No, I wouldn't have. So this is the other part of the top that I've glued down and going to have to cut out. And I think I'll be able to do a much better job with the electric. So between the fretwork and the veneer, that's...
You've got your work cut out for you?
Yeah.
Do you reckon you'll be able to do it?
I think so, yeah. I think it'll work. It's just a little bit more time now.
Yeah. Well, I really look forward to seeing the finished article.
Thanks.
Now it's time for the Antique Watch studio, where Paul Johnson and I will be looking at a very expensive bucket. But first, books.
We've got a very old battered version of Charles Kingsley's Water Babies here, Graham, but where did you get it?
My father bought it about 15 years ago, and he liked the plates in it, so he paid £20 for it.
For plates?
For the plates in it, yeah, the illustrations.
Tell us a bit about it there, Fonzie.
Yeah, it's a nice copy of Kingsley's Water Babies, illustrated by Warwick Goebel. It's not the first edition, alas, which was printed in 1863 and was illustrated by a man called Patton. It's a nice edition, but also of this edition there was a deluxe edition which came out in a limited edition of 260 copies with a vellum binding, same plates and everything else. But unfortunately this one here, because of its condition, which you'll see, is not very desirable. So what happens with books of this caliber is when they're in bad condition, that people come along and they pull the plates out of them and they frame them, which is quite nice. But if the book was in good condition, binding-wise, etc., it would be sacrilege to do that.
Mm-hmm. How many copies would...
There would have been about 1,500 of this edition, but 260 of the deluxe edition.
Yeah, right.
Again, with books it's different to furniture. Furniture was handmade, books are mass-produced, so you can wait and get the good copy of the book that you seek, rather than buying a poor copy. Mind you, at £20 it wasn't too bad. It's a nice book to hold and to have.
So what would you put a price? What price would you put on it?
This one would be somewhere in the region of £80 to £100 in that condition. In good condition, maybe £250, but the deluxe edition would be about £750.
Right.
That's not bad at all.
Not bad on the investment.
Good improvement.
Yeah. Thank you.
Paul, a wood and brass bucket. Now read on.
The full description should read an Irish brass-bound ribbed plate bucket.
Were they specifically Irish?
They were only Irish. They were only made in Ireland. They were never made anywhere else, and they were made in pairs, one for plates and one for peat.
And is this for plates?
This is for plates because of the slit in the side, for ease of putting in and taking out.
But this was the plates from the dining room to the kitchen and back to the dining room and all that?
Yes, exactly. But also they kept these both buckets by the fire to warm the plates up.
Sensible.
Made, I would say, around the early part of the 19th century. I say that because they were made between 1790 and 1820. I say that this is a little bit later because of this kind of spiral twist motif.
Is that a giveaway sign that it's a little bit later?
Yeah, that it's a little bit later. That this is kind of very much a Regency thing that came in the Regency period, rather than in the late Georgian period. The condition of it isn't great, but it's not irreparable. It really just needs a good tightening up and a polish.
It's a bit rattly, isn't it?
It's a little bit rattly. It just needs tightening. Those brass rings need tightening. I suppose with central heating, etc., just loosen the glue. But there's nothing.
I'd be aching to polish that.
I know it'd be lovely to get some wax out of it.
Because you just know that you're going to get the glow on it.
Yeah, exactly. And it will come up wonderfully with a great glow. Because there's superb mahogany in that. And there's a little bit of punching around the brass plates, which is very nice. It's just a little feature, added feature, which just makes it better, if you like, than the normal. And of course, you get the ordinary plate buckets that don't have the ribs. Just have.
Are they worth less money?
Oh, a lot less money. Yeah.
So what
almost
sort of
half.
money? What sort of money are we talking about on this one here?
I would think £3,000 to £3,500.
As it stands.
As it stands now, but if there were a pair, it would certainly be worth between 8,000 and 10,000 as a pair.
So it's serious money, isn't
Yes,
it?
it is. Yeah. But they're worth it. They're very rare things.
This week we're looking at fire irons. Now, most homes in Ireland have at some time in their lives experienced fire irons, but who have experienced the authentic ones and the reproduction ones?
Exactly.
Which is reproduction, Dennis, I'd say.
I'm afraid, Jim, you've made an error there. That, in fact, is a correct Victorian shovel from a set of fire irons.
Look, there's a fair difference in the wood.
I know, but in fact, this one here is the reproduction. This was possibly made in the last 5 years. It may not even be solid brass, and it's designed deliberately and contrived to look antique, but in fact it is in antique terminology brand new. It's 2 from a set of 3, and where investment is concerned, you're better off keeping away from that type of set and keeping towards the Victorian or earlier.
This is Victorian then?
That's Victorian. Victoria died in 1901 across the water, and these are pre-1901, and there's two from a set of 3 here, and 2 from a set of 3 here, but all genuine article. It's very, very hard to tell sometimes. But if you look here, the screws here are brand new going through on this particular piece, and that in fact is a giveaway sign itself. Also, the actual finish of the brass in the mould is not very, very clear. It's not a wonderful finish. All of it smacks to me as reproduction. It's taken me 24 years as a trained expert to actually to know at a glance what's antique and what's not, and unfortunately these are brand new.
It's
So
taken
stick
me
to
2
the
minutes to find out.
well, stick to the real thing.
What value would you put on this then?
I would put on the pair there, because I don't know what has happened to the actual poker on this lot, probably in the region of £100.
These ones?
This pair here, 1 to 150, and the same with that pair there.
But this is the investment.
That's the investment. I'm not saying these are going down in value, but the investment is in the antique.
Okay, point taken.
Silver is still very, very popular. It looks so rich around your house, and everybody loves to get a present of a little piece of silver to mark the passages through time. Helen has some terrific tips.
All is not silver that glitters. Nothing here is real silver, it's all plate. For hundreds of years there wasn't enough real silver to go around, and the search was on for a cheap substitute. People often think that all plate is old Sheffield plate, but that's by no means true. What exactly is real old Sheffield? Well, it was invented by Thomas Bolsover in 1740, from Sheffield, needless to say. And in effect, it was a sheet of silver overlaid with a sheet of copper, so you had a copper and silver sandwich. As you can imagine, at the edge of the sandwich, a little piece of the copper would be peeping through. So what did they do? This is a very good way of telling the real thing from ordinary plate. They overlapped a sheet of the silver, at the edge of the silver, overlapped all around the edge, concealing the copper. That's one way of telling the real thing. Another way of spotting real old Sheffield is in those days people adored showing off. They adored putting their coats of arms and family crests and initials and things on their bits of plate. As you can imagine, if you engraved on a piece of old Sheffield, the copper would show through. So what they did was they inserted a plaque of pure silver underneath before the engraving. If you look closely at that, you could see that's one of the real bits of old Sheffield. Lastly, I want to show you this delicious little item. circa 1800, worth about £900, a real collector's piece. It's called an Argyll, and it was invented by the Duke of Argyll because he was fed up of having cold gravy. In those days, his kitchens would be about 300 yards from the dining room. So if you look inside this dear little thing, you will see a little internal container in which they put boiling water, the gravy around the outside, rushed from the kitchen. Hey presto, hot gravy for a duke. The sort of plate you're much more likely to meet is electroplate. This was invented about 1840 with the Industrial Revolution and the rise of the middle classes. There was a huge demand for expensive-looking silvery items, i.e. lots of flash for not much cash. Electroplating was quicker and cheaper and easier to make than old Sheffield, and basically it pushed the old Sheffield makers right out of business. In those days, they liked a different item to eat every different thing that they ate on the dining room table. This is a sort of an elegant little veg server here. This is a spoon warmer. Heaven knows why you needed a spoon warmer, but it might have been something to do with ice cream. These are coasters, wine coasters. Just imagine those with a nice bottle of wine or a decanter in. Interestingly enough, the plate makers often try to do sort of almost fake silver marks. If you look at that quickly, it almost looks like a silver mark on that fish slice. This is a delicious thing for serving strawberries. It has strawberries on the top, nice little ventilation holes around the outside. That's a good quality embossed circa 1860 coffee pot that would have been part of a set. That in plate is worth 600 or 700, and in silver would be about 2,000. You'll find bits of plate around shops and auction rooms all over Ireland. The interesting thing is, it doesn't reduce the value of an electroplated item to replate it. If you look closely at this spoon warmer, you'll see this sort of yellow colour in the middle there, where the plate is starting to show through. It doesn't take the value away to replate it, whereas true old Sheffield collectors do not approve at all of replating old Sheffield. Say you're in an auction room and you want to check for a piece is in good condition for replating, like this very fancy salver here. Electroplating, if it's got slight damage, actually can damage it further when it's immersed in the bath of potassium cyanide. What you do is you pick it up by its leg and you give it a bang. You should get a nice clear sound like a bell instead of a dull thud, which means it's damaged. To my mind, rather than a turd old bit of silver, I'd infinitely prefer a really fancy, good quality bit of plate.
This is an Irish side table of about 1730. Absolutely fine and rare, the best. Made in an odd way in that it's a historical document in itself, this thing, because it's so rare and fine. Funny details. It's made in walnut, although mahogany had arrived. He just did that because that's what he wanted to do. It has a sort of a Spanish continental feel to it, which is quite odd. It has this absolutely extraordinary cabriolet that comes down into this gather, as they call it here. And then he pulls it off by reversing out again and coming back down into putting a sock, one of the earliest that there's known. And then it goes into a faceted foot, or a padouk foot as it's called in the trade. And he has these little volutes that follow around for the leg across the apron in astonishing quality, in the timber, this patination they call it, which gives these things such enormous value to the collectors. And again across into the shell that he puts there. Done by a guy who didn't really bother about the rules that much. You know, it was a peculiar feature of this Irish furniture. These guys weren't like English or weren't like the Americans, where they slavishly followed to rules. Kind of the national characteristic, you know, the odd time they just took a fagari and went off, and this is one of them. He even has the confidence when it goes around the side, where with little peeping shells at the side, which we've never seen before. And you know, the guy just said, you know, why not? It's one of those. This is just absolutely a wonderful, wonderful thing. And when you imagine that the piece of marble on top of this, which they call fat and mutton, that is the original piece of marble from about 1730, which, you know, it's extraordinary that this has survived so long. I've been collecting furniture and going to shows and generally hanging around auctions all my life, and this is still my favourite piece of furniture, just because it breaks all the rules and yet it's still inside the frame. So feast your eyes on it because you will never, ever see better.
You know, I'm really getting to know about Irish furniture now. I didn't realise that we made such good quality pieces here. Anyway, on to something more practical. Here's Helen.
All that glitters is not, or is it, gold? What can you do with that old frame in the attic or out in the shed? Don't dump it. Follow me to a converted warehouse in Dublin Stocklands. Carol Booth is a gilder who restores here the ornately carved frames of a more leisurely age. Old building, new purpose. Old craft, new hands. But what about my more humble offering?
I'd say it was originally gilded, all right. You can see little traces of the gold underneath, but somebody has painted it with gold paint and so it's all tarnished.